what you want to do in the study phase for the exams is you want to learn the basics. You want to make sure you've got to grips with all the core concepts and the core principles. And it may well be that you're doing this by subject or topic area. And there'll be lots of examples that you can bring in. But yeah, study phase, it's important that you're learning the core basics. For any of the papers, make sure you've got all your core basics down. And also linking it back to the syllabus. If you're looking at the syllabus, say if you're not working from course provider materials where it's all been done for you, you need to make sure you go back to the syllabus and look at the level of knowledge that you need. The syllabus breaks it down into levels 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is like a really basic level, like awareness level. And then level 2 is a good working knowledge. And then level 3 is super in-depth. And it's very helpful that the syllabus is broken down in that way. So you can see where you can target your studies. And if it's a level 1 area, so that subject is you only need very much an awareness level of it, then you can do pretty much light reading on it. It's not too bad. Obviously, if it's a level 3, then you need to have a bit more in-depth knowledge. Now, for example, for paper 1, so for module 1 on your international tax principles, a lot of the material on the different articles of the OECD treaty is a level 3 knowledge. You're supposed to have an in-depth knowledge of that area. So you do need to focus on that. But then there are some other areas which are like level 1. I think some of the indirect tax stuff, some of the miscellaneous stuff is like a level 1, just a general awareness level knowledge. So it's good to use syllabus to indicate that. But definitely you'll find that if you are going to a course provider, they will have made sure their materials pick up on that, because our materials, we know from the syllabus what in-depth knowledge you need and where you only need a very light touch. And so our materials reflect that, so our manuals reflect that. And that's what you might be doing actually in your study phase, is using the manuals. Now, use materials that are provided maybe by your course provider. We offer manuals and question banks, but you might find you've got the textbooks. What you want to do is making sure the study phase, you need to be going through these materials, highlighting them as you go through. Same with the permitted text. Often I say to students, make sure you've got your manuals, or if you're working from textbooks, even textbooks. So manuals or textbooks, and then have your permitted text, so the Keys van Rad, the text that you can take in with you to the exam next to you as you're going through the materials. And that way you can highlight your permitted text at the same time that you work through all the manuals and all the question banks. And that, so you're not waiting till the last minute to try and do it, you're doing it as you go along. And then by the time you come to the exam, your permitted text that you're going to have with you in the exam, like the Keys van Rad book or like the OECD transfer pricing guidelines, it's all been done for you. You've highlighted it already and it's tagged up and ready to go. So yeah, study phase, very important that you sort of keep your permitted text with you and work through it as you go along. So what are the other things I was thinking about here? Short questions, yes. As part of your study phase, I think it's worth starting to answer questions. Now, I've got another phase, revision phase, where I start talking about making sure you start doing exam questions from the past papers. But I think during the study phase, it's good to have short questions that ask you about specific areas, so you test your knowledge. Other ways of learning would be, apart from maybe getting, definitely course providers might provide you with lists of short questions you can do to test your knowledge. If you don't have that, I think during the study phase, you want to consolidate what you've done. It's quite useful to go off and maybe just speak to someone about it. And now I've got my sister. She's often had me speaking to her about different topics. And it's very good to bounce off someone. And if you can explain it to someone who doesn't know anything about it, if you can explain that topic to them, then that shows that you understand it. So if you haven't got the ability, don't have set lots of short questions, maybe you haven't got hold of a manual to look at, then don't forget, if you've got a friend, a family member or a colleague, someone you can just talk through those issues that you've been reading about, then if you can explain it to someone else, then that is going to be embedding it in you and you'll remember it better. But also things like mind maps. I know some students love a mind map and they do different mind maps for just sort of different articles, etc., of a treaty, or flashcards. I think that all works. You need to practice whatever works for you. As you go through the material, you could be creating, a shortened version of things like flashcards, but also overviews that you can use as memory joggers. I think that's also very helpful. But also, I mentioned previously, don't forget to read around the subject. Yeah, journals and blogs. I think definitely during the study phase, you need to be reading journals where you're reading up-to-date articles on different areas. In particular, if you're doing module 1, if you're doing the international tax principles, because you need to be looking at different viewpoints on different areas. So not just learning the core material, you need to be looking at why is it there, how is it working, what are the people's viewpoints on these areas.